Hey guys, and welcome back. Today we are continuing the medicinal mushroom collection, right, in the immune system series. And I need you to prepare yourself because today's mushroom story, well, is weird. And when I say weird, I mean Nature watched a science fiction horror movie and said, hold my tea. Because today's mushroom doesn't start on a tree, doesn't grow in a field, doesn't pop up in your backyard after a good rain or grow weirdly behind your toilet. Today's fungus starts on a caterpillar. I know, we're all a little uncomfortable, but stay with me. So, today's story takes us from the mountains of Tibet all the way down to the supplement aisle at your local health food store, and somewhere in between, this strange little fungus became one of the most talked about mushrooms in the world. Wonder why? So let's start with the original cordyceps, right? So you've got Ophiocordyceps sinensis. I think that's how you say it. This is the cordyceps that most people think of when they hear the name. Historically, this fungus infected the larvae of ghost moths that lived in the high altitude regions of Tibet, Nepal, India, and parts of China. And over time, the fungus consumed the insect and eventually produced a fruiting body that emerges from the soil. And yes, that's exactly as creepy as it sounds. Bug mushrooms. So I'm convinced the very first person who discovered this said, look, that's horrifying. And then somebody else said, we should probably take it home, study it, and eat it. You really got to wonder how some of these things came into being. But anyway, why did people value it? Because it was incredibly rare, okay? And because it was rare, it became incredibly valuable. So in traditional Chinese medicine, cordyceps were associated with vitality, endurance, recovery, respiration support, and, well, overall wellness, right? And remember, we're talking about people living in mountainous regions. So the idea of breathing, endurance, energy, and stamina, they weren't separate conversations. They were all connected, right? Remember, as you go up, the air gets harder to breathe. So, because everything eventually changed, here's the problem. Wild Ophiocordyceps sinensis, right, is expensive. I mean, really expensive. And harvesting it raised concerns about sustainability. There simply wasn't enough to go around. Not enough infected insects. Never thought I'd hear that. But anyway, so researchers and cultivators started looking at another option, and that's where Cordyceps militaris enters the story. So this is the cordyceps you're most likely to find today, okay? So unlike the original species, Cordyceps militaris can be cultivated under controlled conditions. Not the Himalayan mountains, not ghost moth caterpillars, no crawling around in the field for fungi growing out of insects. Today, it is commonly grown in jars and in controlled growing environments. And honestly, I think most of us are probably okay with that because nobody wants bug mushrooms. So, which one's in your supplements? Well, that's where things get important. Because when you pick up a bottle that says cordyceps, it doesn't actually tell you very much now, does it? Right? Is it Cordyceps militaris or Ophiocordyceps sinensis? Is it a blend? Was it cultivated? Was it extracted? These are questions worth asking, right? We've become too trusting in our labels, right? Because none of this is identical, right? And understanding what you're actually taking, well, it does matter, guys. It really does matter. Also, if you're paying really premium prices for cordyceps and it's the one that's made in the lab and not the one that's growing on the bug, you might want to ask some questions. So why are athletes so interested in cordyceps? Well, this is probably where most people first hear about it, right? You'll hear things like energy, endurance, stamina, right? Exercise, performance. And that's another buzzword they throw around with them. And honestly, it's not completely surprising, right? Because traditional descriptions frequently emphasized vitality and recovery. Modern research simply started asking those questions in a different way, right? Can we measure exercise performance? Can we measure the oxygen utilization? Can we measure the endurance, right? And suddenly, these little cordyceps moved from traditional practice into sports nutrition, okay? So that's kind of how the evolution began. But it's not just about energy. And here's something I think that gets overlooked, right? Cordyceps aren't traditionally discussed only in terms of athletic performance. You'll also find conversations surrounding respiratory support, immune function when you really go digging for stuff, inflammation, energy and metabolism. And honestly, it kind of makes perfect sense, right? Again, think about what happens when you exercise, right? Your lungs work harder, your muscles work harder, your energy demands increase, your metabolism can change. Those systems are all communicating with one another, right? As we're learning, things don't live in a vacuum. So that's kind of how that all got tied together. So how do people use it today? Well, most people aren't buying caterpillars and infecting them, right? That's probably for the best, save the caterpillars. But today, you'll find cordyceps in powders, capsules. You can find it in tinctures. I actually have some capsules up there, and extracts, coffee blends. They kind of put them everywhere. They're like Frank's hot sauce, but they're pretty much in just about any energy supplement you're looking for too. And this is where I always encourage people, turn your bottle over, right? Because if all the label says is cordyceps, well, you still don't know what you're buying, do you? Especially now that you know there's two types, right? So as always, natural doesn't automatically mean appropriate for everyone. Concentrated supplements are not the same things as traditional usage, right? So if you are pregnant, breastfeeding, taking medications, or managing any chronic health conditions, it's always a good idea to speak with your healthcare provider before starting any new supplements, okay? So I think cordyceps teaches us one of the most fascinating lessons in this entire mushroom collection. You know, there were infected caterpillars out there, right? Traditional usages evolve, research evolves, cultivation evolves, right? And sometimes one little fungus can travel all the way from a caterpillar in the Himalayan mountains to a capsule sitting on your store shelf. And honestly, it's kind of incredible to think about, right? So next time, we're going to talk about chaga. And if you think cordyceps has a strange story, well, just wait until we start talking about a fungus that grows on birch trees and somehow became one of the internet's favorite superfoods. So until next time, guys, stay rooted, stay curious, and as always, keep growing in grace.